What happens when you stop thinking thoughts are yours? What happens when you stop thinking that your own thoughts are yours? That's the one question that's been appearing for me over this past week. And for me, the question is so profound because tonight we seek its answer live. At a point, we have to start asking, what is the nature of thinking? What is the nature of thought? Why do we even care about this question? The reason is because without thought, the human mind cannot know suffering. Without thinking of the past or imagining the future or worrying about the present, there could be no suffering, which means if we were to understand the mechanism of thought, if we were to pick thought apart, find out what it is and who sent it, could we discover the most powerful means of transforming ourselves and transforming our minds? Folks, in tonight's experiment, we seek the answer to the question most have never asked. What happens when you stop thinking thoughts are yours? Without further ado, we need to get to tonight's show because this conversation started from a clip that I want to show you. Something profound. And for me, it just got me thinking like, if we can get, it's not enough to just be a neuroscientist. It's not enough to just be somebody who's read a bunch of books about the subject. I'm saying, I want to know from my primary experience, what is the makeup and nature of my thinking? And is it possible? Is it possible that were I to see thought as its own organism, what happens to the way that I interface or interrelate with myself and the world? Folks, if you're ready to live free beyond fear, welcome here. I'm Dr. Shawn, and I believe you do not need years to heal. You just need one real breakthrough. That's why I invented Transcendent Psychology, and I test it in the real world, on real people, on my game show, Countdown to Breakthrough, the only game show that heals your soul. Right now, you're on the Breakthrough Live, where we break down the science of healing so that you get your own breakthrough live on tonight's show. We are interrogating this line of thinking that was sparked in me from the clip I'm about to show you. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and jump to the clip because that's going to set up our conversation for the evening.
And this is where, it starts to get a little bit disturbing. Language is an autonomous informational system. One may even call it an organism, and it runs in our brains. It's downloaded against your will.
By the time you're reading the waiver, it's too late. What makes you think your thoughts are your own? According to groundbreaking work by professors Elon Barinholtz and William Hahn, every word you speak comes from an alien intelligence that installed itself in your brain during infancy. Language, they argue, is an organism that uses human minds as its substrate. Elon Barinholtz was interviewed before on this channel, and it went viral. Link is in the description. Professor Barinholtz contends that our linguistic system operates on meaningless squiggles, with no access to the rich sensory world of experience. He believes that LLMs can master language but never feel pain, for instance. Professor William Hahn, on the other hand, who's also been interviewed and it went viral, link is in the description, extends this to virtual machines and software layers. Professor Hahn thinks that consciousness is just one of many programs running in parallel. I was invited to moderate this panel live at the University of Toronto with this event organized by Echo Lopto. Again, link.
Okay, so they're about to go into it. But the point is that I found that to be so fascinating. Now, what they start talking about consciousness and these different, it would be interesting to see what they come up with. For our purposes today, I'm more interested in this question of what if your thoughts are not your own? Where would they have to come from? Which gets us to a question of what is the nature of thinking. So I go into deep meditation over this over the past week. And this conversation is a conversation. I know it seems like it's everyone I feel like feels like they have their own answer, but truly you would need thousands of hours of meditation, thousands of hours of sitting at the altar of yourself and watching. I'm only interested in them type of answers. I'm not interested in the intellectual, you know what I'm saying, however fascinating they are. I'm interested in the very question of where do our thoughts come from? What is the nature of thinking? And if our thoughts define our reality, what if your thoughts aren't even yours? Ooh. As you can expect, this gets us to the heart of identity, the heart of the self. And so tonight, I'm for real looking to investigate this question, but we can only investigate it by actually looking within ourselves. So that's where we'll be going. Notice the connection with language. This researcher is saying that language itself is like an alien substance that is being programmed. And language and thought, they go together. If you remember back to your freshman college courses, you might remember something called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. That idea that language constructs reality. You could also say that thought constructs reality. Language and thinking, they go together. And so this person posited that language itself is extraterrestrial. I said, "Oh, that's so fascinating. I don't care what's right. I care about what we can do with what has been said. I don't care about if it's accurate. I care about that energy, that impulse that gets us to ask a new question and therefore arrive at a new answer." So I got to take you to something that I call, I guess I'm calling it the breakthrough binder. Okay, so watch this. Literally, this binder right here is chock full of straight up downloads. Every time, I'll see if I can, and I got a whole bunch of notebooks that are super full, just like this, right? Every time that consciousness, that spirit gives me an insight, I write it down. It'd be 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, often it is 4 in the morning, often it is And in the middle of the night, I'll get up and start scratching out the insight, because these insights become the base layer of every single thing that I do in terms of transcendent psychology, right? So it becomes a book, it becomes the new love book, it becomes spiritual responsibility, it becomes these different books. And I'm always surprised by what is being said. And so what I want to do is I want to take you through just a few of these entries, because since we last talked, since last week, Sublime is in the room, a commonplace book. Okay, okay. I'm seeing folks coming through saying good evening, good evening. Sublime, good evening. Ferrer. Yo, put your names in the chat so I can shout you out for real, for real. Twin is in the room. Welcome in, welcome in. We have other Twin in the room. Felicity is in the room. Good evening, good evening. Okay, okay, okay. So I started getting into this, right? I started thinking like, what if our thinking is not our own? Right? You have a thought and you get the sense that, well, because it is a memory of your own life, that it must belong to you, that you must have been the one to think it. Hmm. So it feels personal to you. So therefore we automatically assume, oh, of course, this is my private thought. That person is not aware of my private thought. Therefore, this thought must have been birthed by me. Uh, it's the kind of thing that's so obvious that you would almost never say, like why would you ever say anything against the very concept, right? I mean, I talk about spiritual responsibility, taking full ownership over everything that is in your experience. So what would it mean then? And I'm really for real. Like we for real about to get to the bottom of this tonight. I do not know the answer, but we about to look. Oh yes. Oh yes. So I get into this meditation, right? And I go in and it's the basic meditation. I've been meditating for 16 years, and formally, and throughout that time, right, 16 years, couple hours a day, that's 10,000 hours, you feel me? And so it's kind of like, but it takes that in order just to look and see what the nature of existence is, or I need to be able to see it from what we call phenomenological perspective, which is to say that I want to see it from the perspective of my actual lived experience. The science on the situation changes all of the time. It'll always be in flux. There'll always be new data, new variables, I can't wait for all that. I need to know right now, what is the nature of my thoughts? So I get to it, right? And so this one is from January 8th. I guess it would have been about 2 weeks ago that it started, where I saw this video. Then last week we of course had Janelle on. But this week I'm kind of getting back to it, and just last night I was finishing up some things. And so one thing that I started noticing is that negative thoughts seem to arise from a subtle disagreement with reality. That one question started getting me deeper and deeper. I'm like, oh, so where are the thoughts coming from anyway? Like, if were I just to sit and look and stare, where are the thoughts coming from anyway? What even is thinking? And what does the capacity for thought tell me about the nature of reality? Hmm. Hmm. Tanya's in the building. Welcome in, Tanya. Okay, excellent, excellent. So I started writing something. I started preparing this thing for you. Let's go to it. Because what I'm thinking about is the 5 levels of thinking. This is the place where I started seeing that, okay, there seems to be 5 levels to thinking, 5 levels of thinking. You feel me? As I'm sitting here just deep in meditation, I'm just watching how thoughts arise, how they fall, that sort of thing. You dig what I'm saying? But at a point, you can see a thought coming, you can feel it kind of, pop out on you. But at some point you start saying, but where did you come from? Out of what substance did you arise? Out of what substance? So I start looking, right? I get to peeking. I start noticing there are 5 levels of thought, or we might call it 5 levels of thinking. I want to share those with you right now. This is not the point of the show, but it's certainly my starting point. Here we go. Level 1 is no thought. That's pure presence. So you can think of this as the space in between thinking, or just when you're completely in the zone, right? There's no thoughts, there's no thinking, because there's no your awareness is completely absorbed in the moment. You only have what is in your immediate perception. It's just your lived experience without any thought at all. Just being in the here and now. Okay. Level 1 is no thought. So we call it getting back to 1, right? But then we have level 2. This is focused presence, but then there starts to be the static noise. So if you get into your deep meditation, what you'll see is that, yeah, you're present, and there's just the darkness behind your eyes, and there's nothing else. And then all of a sudden, there will be these movements. It'll be just these slight images, these noises, these sounds, these words, but they're all just complete memories or formulations, patterns, stimuli that you have observed during your day that are now recycling back through your waking consciousness. I call these static noise type thoughts. You don't really, most people don't even notice that they're there. But if you could imagine these sort of uh, piecemeal, these like little tiny, these little thoughts, they kind of collect and gather together until they start forming larger pictures in the mind. Fascinating. Okay, so then we get to level 3. This is coming completely out of my own session. From that static noise type of thought, that's when our agreements and disagreements with reality can happen. Now we start getting into what's called discursive thought. That's just thinking in language, thinking with words. This discursive thought, now we're talking to ourselves. Talking about what we got to do today, what's going to happen tomorrow. You feel me? And as we continue to do that, then we start getting into what I call phenomenal reliving. This is thinking with all of the senses. So now it's not just you sitting here talking to yourself, it's you back in the past or trying to project yourself into the future, where you literally project yourself into a situation where you are taking on the sights, the sounds, the tastes, the hearing. You are fully 3-dimensionally inside of this new environment. You're thinking about what you got to do tomorrow. You're thinking about you have to go to the grocery store. Now you're placing yourself in the store, and you're thinking, "Oh man, I hope I don't have to see Sally on the way." Whatever, like, you know what I'm saying? Like you're putting yourself into this. I noticed for me, I'm putting myself into this 3-dimensional experience of either past or future. I'm either reliving something or I'm in the future somewhere. These are this is the 4th level of thought. So now we're beyond just thinking about and thinking in language, beyond talking to myself. I'm literally reliving either a future moment, or sorry, a past moment, or I'm projecting myself into a future moment. Okay. But it's 3-dimensional. It's thinking with all of the senses. You'll find that this is the place where all of the anxiety comes from. Because to the person who is at the 4th level of thinking, their body is still in the present, but their thoughts, their minds are in a whole different, are taking up attention and they're in a whole different environment, one that is not here. Okay, so we have this phenomenal reliving, typically of the past, but it can also be a reliving of an imagined future. Hmm. Then we get to level 5. These runway thoughts, this is where we have the arising of runway thoughts that give way to other thoughts. Right? Thinking itself works by association. In human beings, when we think of something, we're thinking always in association with something else. So when we have a thought about whatever we have to do today, one thing that the mind can do is immediately let me know y'all can still hear me. This is all important because once we can see that a runway thought is starting to germinate, it's starting to spread to other sections of our mind, it's starting to produce, give birth to thoughts of a similar nature. You think about one situation that you're really ambivalent about, you really don't want to even go into the office tomorrow or whatever the case is, and that feeling of anxiety associates back to your own childhood. You start thinking about a time that you were hurt decades ago. All inside of we're talking seconds, we're talking microseconds of flipping through these experiences. And once you're at the stage of phenomenal reliving, the problem is that you're now actually feeling it. You're now reliving, refilling the situation in the first place. So we call that basically living in the phantom zone, right? Where you're revisiting the phantoms of the past or the ghosts of the future, and you're actually feeling what it's like to experience these emotions all over again, as if the situations that you're facing are real and appearing here and now. Because from the perspective of your attention, which is focused on these thoughts, you are reliving this experience in the here and now. You are anxious all over again. You did what I'm saying. So as I'm sitting here thinking about this, I'm like, okay, so these are like the 5 levels of thought. And none of these need to be a problem. You can have presence at every step, or you can be lost at every step. In other words, you can step back and observe the static noise, observe the discursive thought, observe phenomenal reliving, and not really be too caught up in it. But that kind of thing takes practice. And to the point that I want to get at tonight is, what is the nature of this thinking in the first place? Where are these thoughts even coming from? So on the show tonight, I want to make sure that we're going back and revisiting. I want to go look again. I want to look fresh. I want to know, how do we get from level 1 to level 2? That static noise, those images, those symbols that just kind of percolate in the mind, they come out of nowhere. You have to be so vigilant to even notice that they are even present. You have to be so vigilant to even notice that they're present. How does that even, when does that start? And what I started noticing is that, and let me know if you've noticed this too, that there's no control Oh, sure, you can decide that you want to create a picture in your mind and project yourself into it. You can decide. There is a level of choice at each one of these stages. But left to its own devices, just watching the mind do its thing, it seems that the thoughts come out, they're choiceless, they come out of nowhere. For me specifically, it feels like the thoughts are choiceless, they come out of nowhere. So if I'm not the one choosing them, how can I be sure that they're mine to begin with? Oh, I get that they come out of patterns. I get that they come out of a past or a memory set that I call my own. But if I'm not the one choosing, I want to get to the nature of thinking itself. 'Cause sometimes you have those thoughts that seem to force themselves in, that seem to be intruders. And sometimes it's really, really hard to get them out. Hmm. Hmm. So I start thinking about this, right? And just coming back, let me get you back here. Okay, so just coming back, I start thinking about, okay, we're getting these levels of thought, and I'm just kind of jotting everything. I'm just writing down the total experience, right? But then we get to one day, can you think a thought so big you collapse thought itself? Can you think a thought so big? That's literally this January 9th. This one right here, if you can see it. If you can see that. Can you think a thought so big that you collapse thought itself? Thoughts appear to be a natural involuntary function akin to breathing itself. Okay. This is day 10, or this is on the 10th. Just as it is possible to consciously direct the breath to achieve psychophysiological goals, so too is it possible to direct thought to achieve psychoneurological goals. But here's the catch. This direct control of thought and breath is not sustainable, nor is it meant to be. Instead, as with the breath, you must surrender control over to nature itself. And so I'm gonna fast forward a few days to just yesterday, to just literally, like, see if I can, to just yesterday. I probably started jotting this out. I woke up at like 2 in the morning the other day, and I just started writing this out. And literally, it's talking about first line. Thought seems to come out of nowhere. But this seeming is likely due to a limitation of the Homo sapiens' capacity to only perceive in 4 dimensions, as opposed to perceiving in 5, 6, 7, 20, 30 dimensions. You dig what I'm saying? More advanced, more evolved, so to speak, intelligent life forms. The intelligence is one, but of course, the way that that intelligence expresses itself in physical form is a totally different thing. For the human being, these ideas just start kind of channeling. They start kind of just coming through to me. Thought seems to come out of nowhere, but this seeming is likely due to a limitation of the Homo sapiens' capacity to only perceive in 4 dimensions rather than 5. What's the 4 dimensions? Well, we got length, width, we got depth, we got height, we got time. But to get out of 4 dimensions and into a 5 dimensional or 6 dimensional or 7 dimensional mind, that's really what we're trying to do tonight. For real, for real. So let me continue. It is entirely possible that thoughts are generated from an external ethereal source, including a medium of substance sensitive to alien interactions and extraterrestrial interfaces. In other words, were there to be aliens, they would likely communicate with humans through thought itself. And we'll come back to that. As a matter of fact, let me handle that now. If we were to consider that there were organisms that could only see within 2 dimensions, they couldn't see in 3 dimensions. So they can only see like a straight line. They live in 2D worlds. So on a flat surface, all they can do is just move on one plane. Right. So this organism with its 2 dimensional mind would not be able to comprehend our world, would not be able to perceive our world, would never be able to see outside of its 2 dimensional framework. Which means that, can I do this with the, let's see if I can do this with the board. This is the breakthrough board, but right now I'm just going to I need to use it for drawing. Okay, so Carl Sagan was great at making this point explicit, that if you have a 2 dimensional organism, his name is John, this organism can only see this world. Why can they only see that world? It's the only world that's available to their perception. And so John can move all throughout this world as much as he wants, but John can never come off of the board. John could never step out off the board and walk around my office. John could not do that. I'm saying if John were a living organism with functional muscles and all the ability to do it, John still would not do it. Because John can't even perceive a perception. He cannot even perceive a dimension that's off the board. This is the entire world and universe to John, our little guy here. And so, were we to introduce something as being 3 dimensional or 4 dimensional beings, were we to introduce a new artifact, a new thing into John's universe, let's say I put a dot here, the 3 dimensional world, and it came into John's 2 dimensional world, you feel me? But from John's point of view, this dot appeared out of nowhere. Because John cannot perceive this pen coming over here and making this nodule and making this mark inside of this board, to John, it would appear as if the black dot simply came out of nowhere. It would be as if you were just in a room and all of a sudden a glowing orb just appears in front of you. You'd be like, whoa, where did this come from? It's coming from a dimension of reality that you cannot perceive, merely because of the limitations of the human mind, the perceptual apparatus that we've developed up to this point in history. You understand? And so, if it's true with John, from a 2 dimensional perspective, what about when you get to a 4 dimensional perspective, but you have the exact same phenomena? I'm suggesting for you tonight that what the black dot is to John, the thing that comes out of nowhere, because it comes from a different dimension entirely, is exactly and precisely what is happening when we are thinking. when we're having these thoughts, even the thoughts that seem private, even the thoughts that seem like they connect up with your own memories. So it became obvious to me that when you have these great sages, you have the Buddha, for example, talking about detach from your thinking, talking about freedom from one's own mind, one's own thoughts. It's becoming clear to me that this is the only way to remain clear. That thoughts can be selected, they can be chosen, that they can be used, but to be identified with, oh, now we start getting into an issue. Let me continue. So, contemporary explanations may suffice for now regarding thought. That is, thought can be thought of as arising from the brain's capacity to recognize and combine external stimuli into patterns subconsciously, to provide the human organism with predictions about what might come next for them based on what has happened before. So we could just say, if you didn't want to get into all this extra dimensional talk, you could just say that thoughts arise from the brain's capacity to recognize and combine external stimuli into patterns subconsciously in order to provide the human organism with a prediction about what may come next, about what to avoid based off of what has happened before, based off of the memories and collections of understanding that that organism has gathered before. But even still, I start to notice that thought seems to arrive because of the fourth dimension of time. Even when we think about a thing that's right in front of us, we use the past or the future to help us think about what we are looking at. Without time, thinking as we know it would be unrecognizable. Thinking as we know it would be unrecognizable. How do we know a thing? Anytime we see a person, we're linking that person up with all the other people we've met. Anytime we're thinking about a situation, we're thinking about that situation in context. Context just means the past, what has happened before. If you remove that capacity for time from the human organism, we go from being 4D to just 3D, you just solved your thought problem. But the other way of thinking about it is if you move from that dimension of time, not from 4D to 3D, but from 4D to 5D, or 6D or 7D, as high as you can get it. Now, all of a sudden, you get a different ability, a different power over thought itself. Or more importantly, thought loses its power over you. You feel me? So I started thinking like this, right? And I started thinking, okay, if you were just a three-dimensional organism, if you're just an organism that sees how we see but just doesn't have the time component. So to think about like a um, you know, any animal, any mammal. They're seeing in three dimensions of space, but they're not necessarily thinking about the past or thinking long term about the future. You dig what I'm saying? They don't have that fourth dimension of time, which means their suffering is not like our suffering. You dig what I'm saying? They are not still beating themselves up over things that happened 20 years ago, 30 years ago. You feel me? But the organism that sees at the three-dimensional mark and the organism that sees above the four dimensions, the organism that sees at the five-dimensional mark, both of these organisms would operate according to frequency, according to different sorts of signals. Many of you know where I'm going with this. The arena of the animal in 3D and the Superman who abides in 5D and higher, these organisms are making their decisions based off of frequency, based off of energy. The three-dimensional organism is working below thought. The five-dimensional organism is working above thought. You feel me? So if this is the case, it gets me asking, what is the nature of the thinking itself? And what power do I have? What happens when I start to step and move from just the fourth dimension to this extra fifth dimension? In order to even comprehend that thought itself is arising out of nowhere, I've got to become aware of what nowhere is. I got to become aware of this sort of liminal space where these thoughts are emerging from. I hope this is not getting too heady. You know what I'm saying? It's probably getting a little too heady, but hey, you know what I'm saying? Some nights you're going to have them nights. So still, the question remains, what would happen? What would happen if I were to stop thinking that the thoughts were mine in the first place? And when I say mine, I'm talking about belonging to a person with a name. Welcome in, Mo. I do see you. Well, Mo is in for the first time. Welcome in, Moses. I see that Twin has brought y'all in. Okay, excellent, excellent, excellent. And welcome in, Twin. I do see you coming in. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Mo, I can't lie to you. Tonight's an interesting night. You know what I'm saying? Because we're about to go and do some things that if this is the first time you've ever seen a show like this or myself or anything like, you know what I'm saying? I understand the question of, man, what is this dude on? But if we can get to the bottom of this question and we can start to separate ourselves from our own memories, not permanently. I'm saying take a higher viewpoint, a higher perception over our own thinking. I wonder what would happen. That's the question tonight, and that's the experiment tonight. Okay, Twins asking, does the outcome change? Does the outcome change? Say more, Twin. I want to know. I want to know what you're talking about. Um, and I want to know exactly what you're talking about. So Sublime is saying those liminal thought spaces have always fascinated me. Right. Right. The Tao Te Ching talks about the Tao is infinite, used but never used up. It is inexhaustible. You may use it any way that you like, right? So the Tao is just another word for consciousness, another word for the presence of God, right? Another word for ultimate nature, supreme reality. And it's out of that liminal space, out of that seeming nothing, just like for John on the in the two-dimensional world, there comes this thing. It became obvious to me that all of thinking was just like that. Let me go ahead and make that connection clear. It became obvious to me that all thinking was just like the experience that two-dimensional John would have, where someone from the three-dimensional world put a new artifact in their environment. So organisms that would be of a higher stage of evolution, organisms that can see in five and six and seventh dimensions, eight dimensions, like if they wanted to communicate with organisms like us, they would just, it's my belief that thought would be the avenue for that, where you don't have to take a spaceship down and try and see people. You can just direct behavior, or I should say highly influence behavior by introducing thoughts to the species. I'm not trying to get into too far. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not trying. That's just a fun question. That don't help. You know what I'm saying? That don't really help nothing that we got to do tonight. But it's a fascinating sort of picture of reality that I'm positing, that has been coming through from these deep meditations, right? And so tonight we've got an experiment. Breakthrough Live is fun for me as long as I get to discover and break through live too. You feel me? So it's kind of like I wanna make sure that I'm creating these spaces and these experiments that I can literally take my practice, things I was gonna do anyway, and I'll just do them live and explain it in such a way that you can come through too. Because if we can get to the bottom of this, think about it, champ. Every problem you've ever had came because of the thought that you had a problem in the first place. If the thought did not exist, the emotion could not exist. If the thought did not exist, the emotion about the thought could not exist. So, what are we saying? We're saying that if you wanted to devise a new therapeutic modality, a new way of healing people's minds, champ, you would get them to be able to witness thought, but stand back from it, understanding that the very nature of thought is for them to appear from out of nowhere. Now, they appear from out of nowhere to us from the fourth dimensional standpoint, of course, but likely there's more to the story. We don't even need to go that far. We just know that people are not in charge for the way in which the static noise of the mind coagulates. They're responsible for how they respond to that, but they're not responsible. Like you're not choosing none of that all of the time. You may choose often, but not all of the time. That tells me something. That's data. I'll go a step deeper, champ. Listen, if you want to control a people, we're talking warfare now. Okay, Moses, welcome in. We got to talk about warfare tonight. If you want to control people, would you sit and try and control their arms, their biceps, their deltoids? If you chain them up, you can't. They can. They're kind of controlled. They can't really do as much. If you throw them underground, they can't really do as much. But if you wanted to control people and make them do your bidding, you would start by controlling their thoughts. Why you think militaries, empires, governments all around the world are fighting in order to make sure that they control three major institutions? What are those institutions, y'all? Control the schools control the schools of a people that you want to dominate, control the religion of a people that you want to dominate, and control the media of a people that you want to dominate. Ooh, each one of those, your schools, your religions, and your media, your churches, your mosque, all that, your schools, your religions, your media. And by the way, historically, those have been one thing: schools, religions, media, each program the mind, each program a person's thinking. So if you wanted to control the people, you would just control how they think, control how they make sense of reality, what options seem obvious and which ones don't. And just make sure that their freedom is the option that don't make no sense. Like, why would I even want that? Famously, Harriet Tubman, who was behind this, the only female general in U.S. history, but she was freeing a lot of people who were prisoners of war, who were enslaved in the United States, and taking them through what's called the Underground Railroad, taking them from the south to the north. She took a whole bunch of people, and she was like, "Listen, I would have freed so much more if they even only if those people who I was trying to free knew that they were even slaves. Only if in other words, only if they even thought that they were slaves in the first place. I would have freed them. But their thinking was so dilapidated. Their thinking was so contrary to their own freedom that to them, freedom didn't make no sense. It was like, for what? That's too much running. If you can control the thinking of a people, you don't need to do too much else. Control the schools, control the religion, control the media. Again, I'll go back to that argument that, we think about caps and gowns when we graduate from high school or college or whatever the case is. Where does that come from? Why are we wearing caps and gowns, champ? Oh, wait, yeah, we wear it because the school, the university, it comes out of the Catholic setting, the early Christian setting, comes out of the church. So the gowns of the students represent the gowns of the priests. The church was the hub where information was spread, not just messages about God and other things, but it was also the place where the town square, it was also the place, like, think of it like the first early newspaper or the first early theater or the first early TV program before they had TVs. Right. So it all comes out of it used to all just be one place. Now it's three separate institutions. But if you control, the point is that if you can control the thinking of a people, you don't need to control anything else. Which means that if you wanted to elevate humanity, free humanity, you would need to have people establishing a different relationship with their own thoughts. Why? Because the programming that people want you to have, who are already trying to control you, you already have it. You already got it. Now the question is can you witness it? Can you partition yourself from it? Can you separate yourself from it? Can you discover the freedom from your own thoughts? This is for anybody. This is for anybody. Can you discover the freedom from your own thoughts, the freedom from your own thinking? Or will you be swept away by the ideologies of the moment that will later prove to be historically incorrect? Like you know what I'm saying? Like why involve ourselves? I want to be able to move from a pure place, from a place that's truer, from a place that is of original nature. I want to move from that unconditional place. Somebody put I understand in the chat if you dig what I'm saying. If you don't dig what I'm saying, then you know what I'm saying, put that in the chat. But I'm really like, just to kind of help you understand why we're even talking about the nature of thoughts anyway. It's because if we can handle this question, then we can handle all suffering that's happening in the human domain. It doesn't mean that we get rid of pain completely. Somebody can still stub a toe, that's fine. But we're talking about that psychological rumination. We're talking about all that depressive and depressing thinking. Just create that split. Create that separation. Okay, Twin saying if the thoughts are not mine, then is the outcome mine? But in the same sentence, being aware projects outcomes. I'm saying that correctly. Okay, interesting. Okay, so Twin saying I heard of the term written in stone. I'm seeing something similarly, but maybe different. Okay, excellent, excellent, excellent. Excellent, excellent. Okay, so Twin saying I understand, Felicity saying I understand. Wonderful, wonderful. So I used to tell my students, I used to teach I taught at a few universities, but one lecture I was given at Ohio University. Um, I remember telling people that one time I was walking into a movie theater. Like I was telling the students this in order to make the very point I'm about to make to you. I was telling the students that the story of me walking into a movie theater, I was seeing The Simpsons, the first Simpsons movie in like 2006, I think. And I get into the theater, you know what I'm saying? I walk into the bathroom and I see this dude, one of these like good looking dudes, you know what I'm saying? But he's got like all this like drip on, like he's kind of, super dressed out. Like in '06, it was kind of cool to wear baggy things, right? So, Buddy was like just super baggied out, jerseys, uh, 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 the Air Force Ones, the jeans kind of rolled up so that they didn't mark up the forces. And I'm walking into the bathroom and Buddy's walking directly at me. And I'm walking and this dude is looking like he is not about to stop. He's looking like he's about to just walk right into me. And I'm like, oh man, are we gonna have a problem in here? Are we about to have a problem? And I can see that he's from the culture. I can see that he's from the community. You know what I'm saying? I can see that. So I'm like, oh man, we really about to. I'm like 17 at the time, so I'm like, I'm gonna have to fight in here. You know what I'm saying? My mama and them outside. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I'm really about to have to fight in the bathroom because this dude thinks that I'm soft, right? And I couldn't fight at the time. You know what I'm saying? But I was like, homie think I'm soft, and so I'm walking and I'm thinking, oh man, it's probably a hood dude. You never know. You know what I'm saying? These dudes come out. He might have hands. So I'm sitting there trying to gauge, like, you know what I'm saying? What would I do first? Maybe I'll throw this right cross. I'm sitting there trying to think about it. And Buddy, what was crazy is that as I'm walking and this dude is getting closer and closer and closer, at a point I just stop and I look him directly in his eyes and I'm ready to say, what's up? Like, what you want to do? And when I do, I realize I'm looking into a full length mirror and that the buddy I was about ready to fight was literally just my own reflection in the mirror. And so it took me years to be like, yo, why did I'm looking at myself. I was the one with the forces and the fit and the thing. I couldn't see all. I mean, I'm saying my joint was baggy. The reason I'm walking, the person looks like they're about to walk into me is because I'm the one that's doing the walking. So at a point, I was like, wait, where in my mind was I programmed to think that a young man who looks just like me at 17 would somehow be violent for no reason, would want to hurt others for no reason, would be disrespectful for no reason? Where had I gotten those ideas from to be feeling all of that anxiety and to have made such a quick and snap judgment about this other person? That one thought got me to the place where I'm like, oh, okay. Wait, I've seen this image before over and over and over again. From the music to the movies to the news and the crime stats, right? You constantly being bombarded with this misinformation, with this one view of a one type of person. And it just so happened that that person was me. And so as I'm sitting here looking at this, I'm like, oh, I was believing subconsciously in the ideas that the world had given me about me. You feel me? I was believing in subconsciously in the ideas that the world had given me about me. That's only never happened to me before. There's never been a time when I've ran into somebody and all of a sudden we got into a squabble. That's never happened in my life. So I didn't. It wasn't as if I was operating off of my own prior experience. I share that story with you just to say that if we do not gather freedom from our own thoughts, it becomes impossible to gather freedom at all. Because without freedom from our own thoughts, we're just gonna operate in the way that we were programmed, in the way that the messages that are hitting us before we can even speak desire us to think. So yeah, this conversation of getting beyond our own thinking, it's the mark of maturity. It's one of the marks of spiritual maturity. And so for tonight, that's what I want to explore. What happens exactly when I stop thinking that the thoughts are mine? What if I knew that, looking at myself in that full-length mirror, that I wasn't the one who programmed my thoughts like this. I never met anyone who would do the things that I was projecting that this young man who was me would do to me. I never met nobody like that. So it's like, where are you getting this information from? And that's just one case. That's just one example. But when you map out your complete understanding of reality itself, you start to see that, oh, wait, these thoughts aren't mine. These ones aren't you. All of this stuff is coming from someone else. So how can if my thoughts are completely driven by somebody else's programming, how can I ever find out what God's purpose is for my life? And when I say God, I'm talking about the supreme nature of reality. I'm not talking about a guy in the sky. I'm talking about the deep fabric of whatever there is, the deep fabric of all that there is. How can I follow that higher choice if the menu I'm sitting here trying to select from is nonsense, is foolishness, designed by people who were interested in control? How could I? I think you're understanding how this goes. Okay, so Twin's saying, yes, sir, the ID, the world perception. Twin's saying that part. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we need our experiment. We need the one thought. What if the biggest thought that you could ever have, the thought that brings lasting peace to your heart, is realizing that your thoughts were never yours at all? That's interesting. If we take that moment, let's turn that into an experiment that we can do right now. I want to go look right now. Because our principle, our path, and our pattern, I'm sorry, our principle, our pattern, and our path, our lesson for the day is going to come directly from this looking that we're about to do. And so let's get to it. I'm going to take a quick break. In the meantime, I'm going to put back on that one joint. I'll be right back.
Links to everything are in the description.
Today, I want to thank everybody who took time out of their schedule and their busy lives doing the many things that people do here in University of Toronto to come for this extremely special live in-person podcast with the Kurt J. Mungle. Give it up for Kurt. He runs the biggest science and philosophy podcast in the world. It's called Theories of Everything. Look that up on YouTube, Twitter/X, Instagram, whatever they call it these days. Kurt J. Mungle, Theories of Everything. Very easy to say. And then we're also joined by Professor William Hahn, who came all the way from Florida. Give it up for Dr. Hahn. Give it up for Professor Lon Barinholtz, who also came all the way from Florida. I'm extremely fortunate to be in the presence of these brilliant people today. And the incredible work Kurt has done with this channel and his podcast over the last couple of years is just nothing short of amazing. And I encourage everybody, if you want to learn about philosophy and science, technology, AI, consciousness, psychedelics like Andreas's work, maybe even hypnosis, all sorts of crazy stuff, I highly recommend you subscribe to this channel. So once again, that's Theories of Everything. And I think without further ado, we should get started, right? Let's rock and roll.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'd like to get started with 5 minutes or so on your theory of everything, the way that you see the world, and then we'll see how Will sees the world, and then we're going to compare and contrast it.
Okay, thanks. So my theory of everything, it's sort of a meta theory because it's a theory of theories. It's a theory of thinking, and it has a couple of parts to it. But I'll cram it all into 5 minutes. The first one is about the nature of language.
Okay. So he's talking about that nature of language. As we get into this exercise, as we get into this experiment, I want you to just be sensitive to everything that appears to you. We're doing things just a little differently tonight. Generally speaking, we do our training at the end. But tonight, so we're going to need to start from a core assumption. And the assumption is one that can be tested right now. That assumption is about awareness. That if you can ask yourself the question, am I aware? And you can say, yes, I am aware. Then that means that regardless of what your name is, other people gave you that, regardless of what your history is, what your background is, what your memory is, we know for sure that you are aware. And so that becomes the only thing, the only position that we're going to take during this experiment. The reason is because awareness is the only thing we can all confirm right now. And in order for you to be here tonight, it requires awareness, right? It requires consciousness. So if we can leave everything else and just stick with that, then we have an opportunity to explore the real question, which is, what happens when you stop thinking thoughts are yours? So let's just go into this exercise with that every thought that is about to appear to you is not yours. I want you to really watch it appearing out of nowhere, coming from this ether, coming from this liminal substance, it just appears. But as we work through and as we look, I want to investigate not just what happens in the mind, but what happens in the body. That's important. I want to know how the nervous system, how the energy of the body is activated, how it responds. And I want to know what we discover when we stop thinking that our thoughts are ours, when you stop thinking that your thoughts are yours, when I stop thinking that my thoughts are mine. Let's get to this. As always, I think it's helpful to think in terms of supreme awareness. Supreme awareness is the first step in everything we do. And so tonight, we're going to begin there. We're going to begin from this undifferentiated awareness. We need to go into the blackness, into the space of the mind. I mean, think of it as we're going to the birthplace of all thoughts, the place where all thoughts enter. Let's get started. Take one deep breath with me. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. At this time, ask yourself the single question: am I aware? See the obvious yes to the question. Allow your awareness to expand to the darkness behind your eyes. Imagine that the darkness behind your eyes is infinite, and that everywhere you can perceive, there is awareness. You no longer have a body. You are aware of the body. You no longer have a name. You are aware of the thought that says you have a name. You are aware of breathing. You are aware of your environment. In fact, the environment, the body, the breathing, and all thoughts simply appear in awareness. They simply appear in the awareness that is you. At this time, remain open to every thought, to any thought that appears to you. Watch where it comes from. Notice the thought the moment it appears for you. You can even describe it out loud. Watch how the images, the symbols, the words simply appear to you. Where do thoughts come from? Ask that question and just look. Where do thoughts come from? Just look. Having seen the thought, having experienced the thought, no matter what the thought is, see the thought as if it has nothing to do with you whatsoever. Like a wave in the ocean, it simply appears and is allowed to go on its way. Notice the one that is aware of all thoughts. It is as if there is a watcher that is the real you, watching all thoughts as they arise. Notice that this watcher does not think. The watcher is watching thoughts arise. The watcher is watching thoughts fall. But the watcher does not think. The watcher is infinite silence. It is as if the watcher is standing above all thoughts. Which is why no thought belongs to the watcher. Which means no thought belongs to you. For you are the watcher, the one that is aware. When thoughts come, what does it feel like to know they are not yours? Watch thoughts as if the thoughts were birds in the sky. They appear, they fly, they disappear, but they do not belong to you. No thought belongs to you. Remain as this silent watcher. Anytime a thought appears, do not busy with the thought. Simply remember the watcher, the silent watcher that never thinks, but is aware of every thought. Watching all thoughts come and go. You can take the thought of your worst fear and just watch it. Put your thoughts on the watcher. The watcher that sees that this most scary thought is not even yours. What does it feel like when even the most scary thoughts no longer belong to you? Remember the watcher, the one that is aware. There is one more thing to note. Notice that love is available. Notice that love is available to send like a gift to all of the thoughts that appear before you, the watcher. Mm. Inhale with me. Exhale. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Mm. Okay, folks. It's like I'm getting hit with this epiphany, but I want to make sure I can. It's pre-language, it's pre-linguistic, and so I want to make sure I can translate it. Yes, I found that the watcher is available. I also found that love was available. That love and the thought about love are different things. That I can see the thoughts emerging just in the 5 levels that I was telling you about at the top of the show. I can see the thoughts emerging, and I can see the one that never thinks. It's like watching the one that never thinks immediately pulls me out of identification with any thought. So now it's not a situation that happened to me in the past. It's just a thought, just a memory witnessed by the watcher, the one that never thinks. You understand? But even in that, I noticed that love is available. That the feeling, the deep feeling of oneness, the deep feeling of this infinite connection, the deep feeling of the God frequency, that's available. It must therefore come from the watcher itself. It must therefore be consubstantial with the watcher itself. Love is not a thought. Right. It's different than thinking of the actual letters. It's different than thinking of an actual person. That's thought. I'm saying love divorced from thinking. Love beyond thinking. The love that's before thinking and the love that's after thinking. You understand? So we come to our question tonight. We come to our question tonight. What happens when you stop thinking thoughts are yours? Let me know in the chat. Did you find it to be easy? Put your experience in the chat. I want to know, did you find an answer for yourself? Did you find like I'm about to work through some things for me, but I'm thinking like, did you find an answer for yourself in regard to that question? What happens when you stop thinking thoughts are yours? Did you, one, get to the place where you stop thinking that thoughts were yours? And two, what happened when you did? That's the question. So I like working from principle. As you know, principles allow me to find my own way when I don't have a whole bunch of information, when I haven't read everything, when I haven't done everything, you feel me? So we like to start from the principles. We like to teach from principle because if we can understand first principles, then we can always find our way back to the truth. So what happens when you stop thinking thoughts are yours? Let's begin with the principle. Hmm. I noticed two things for me. It's gonna take me a minute, okay? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like this, I'm not this the break. Remember, this new session of the Breakthrough Live, this new way that I'm doing things is I don't know the principle, the pattern, and the path before we come on live. So I'm for real discovering it with you. So what happens when you stop thinking thoughts are yours? What happens when I stop thinking that thoughts are mine? Ah, oh man. There were two things. I started feeling one, the sense of maturity return, the sense of separation, and then the sense of unification. Those are kind of the twin poles, the separation from the thinking itself, but then this unification, this idea that the watcher, it's not quite appropriate to say that you stop thinking that the thoughts are yours. It's more like it's more like you stop thinking that the thoughts are exclusive to you. Selves are made out of the same substance that you are made out of, but they are like it would be like the ocean being upset at a wave. The wave is gone too soon for you to care, and also the wave is also made out of you, but does not define you. You feel me? So it's like this separation plus unification. I still felt that love was there. I still felt that love to the thoughts themselves, and in so doing, the thoughts they became like happy critters. Even the worst thoughts. I'm talking about the worst fears. You know what I'm saying? When I said, "Hey, look, to think of that thought of the worst fear," for real. You bring that thing in, and then this love is still available. One, there's separation, so I feel cool. I don't feel like I'm threatened at all because it's just a thought. But then I understand that this greater love is actually available. So when I send the love to the thought, all of a sudden, now the thought isn't even I no longer have a opinion about it. There's not even a disagreement with its existence. There's no longer a disagreement even with its existence, even when it's a thought that I don't care about. Or I'm sorry, a thought that I prefer not to have, even if it's a worse fear. So I see this twin pole of separation, unity. The unity, of course, is that love experience where I can welcome the thought because I know that it wasn't going to hurt me anyway. But whatever it is, it's almost like the love is honoring the substance out of which thought is made in the first place. Whatever that liminal state is that these thoughts appear in, that they seem to pop out of nowhere. You call it the fifth dimension, the sixth dimension, the seventh dimension. It must be connected with us in the here and now, and therefore a part of us, and therefore worth loving. Man, and maybe that's and And maybe that's the principle for tonight, which is that when you say, okay, what happens when you stop thinking thoughts are yours, the immediate realization, or immediate, I mean, we took some time to get there, but the thing that's appearing for me right now is that all of you is worth loving. You see that all of you is worth loving, that the very substance out of which thoughts are made, they do not define you. The thoughts do not define you, but they do not control you, but they do arise from this common source, the very source that is common to all experience. Right? That watcher is aware of a thought in the same way that it's aware of the taste of tea. That watcher is aware of the worst fears in the same way that it's aware of the people you love the most in the world. It's a common substance. And so no matter if we talk in 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions, 5 dimensions, 6 dimensions, 8 dimensions, no matter how far we go in reality, no matter how much more we learn, we find that this common substance out of which all things appear is definitely connected to me, is definitely connected to you, which means that they are a part of you. And what I'm saying is that the principle of the evening is that all of you is worth loving. This is the recognition that appears when you stop thinking thoughts are yours. That the thoughts, yes, they come and go, but they are made of a substance that is not separate from yourself. The thoughts have no dominion over that substance. They do not determine what is ultimate reality. But to reject a thought is, in a way, to reject a portion of yourself. And so there's no need for all of that. One thing that we learn from the watcher is that we get this separation. I don't need to follow thoughts wholesale. I don't need to do, you know what I'm saying? I don't, the watcher is seeing the thoughts. The thoughts do not belong to the watcher as if they are jewelry or offspring. That's not what I mean. The thoughts simply appear, but in appearing, they enter into a reality that is you, that is made up of you, this watcher, you, this awareness. If that watcher disappears, all of reality disappears. When that watcher is here, all of reality can be experienced, which means that the watcher and reality are one, since they go together. And if they're one, then that means they're also you. And if they're you, then all of you is worth loving. You understand? That's the principle of the evening. That's the principle of the evening. If we can remember that, if we can remember that thoughts are literally like waves in the ocean, they come, they go, but they are sharing a common substance with the ultimate, with the totality of the ocean itself is represented. A portion of it is represented in each wave. There would be no wave if there weren't that ocean. So what it look like if the ocean is fighting the waves? That's crazy. That is to create a schism, a gap within yourself. And there you go. There's our pattern for the evening. We say, okay, what's the pattern? Why do we get into trouble in the first place? The pattern is that in looking to fight, reject, get rid of thoughts, any thought, you are going to war with yourself. Let me put the pattern up here. Nah, that ain't gonna happen. I'm sitting here trying to draw. The pattern, the reason we get into trouble in the first place, the reason that suffering can happen in the first place. Here we go. This is the pattern. Once I understand the pattern of something, I can recognize it. Once I can recognize it, now I can deal with it. You feel me? So the principle tonight was that all of you is worth loving, which is to say that thoughts are a part of you. That's what happens when you stop thinking thoughts are yours, is that you start seeing that they don't belong to you, but that they are still a part of experience. And that experience is only possible because of you, which means that experience and yourself are one. So, in other words, to reject a thought is to subtly reject a part of yourself, not in the micro, but in the macro. So the pattern is this: to fight any thought is to go to war with yourself. Now, isn't that interesting? We started with the question, what happens when you stop thinking thoughts are yours? And we start finding that, wait, thoughts, they are not mine, as in to hold. If they were mine, that means they would be separate from me. If they were mine, that means they would be something that belonged to me, something external that belonged to me, or something that I created that I could lose. Rather than understanding that thoughts are connected with the totality of existence, and that if I want to end the war with thoughts, if I want to actually end my suffering, that I must end the war with thoughts. So it is not that the thoughts belong to me, it is that they are a part of the common substance that is me. There's no separation, which means there's no sense in fighting. The watcher is able to create a level of distance, but that distance is allowing the watcher to detach. Having detached from thinking, I can now recognize what the very substance of all thought is. And recognize that as thoughts come and go, the substance that is common to all thought, outlast all thought, and therefore is unaffected by all thought. That substance is myself. And so this gets us to the path. Once I understand that reality and myself go together, that the thoughts that I was formerly fighting against belong to a sacred substance that requires no fight. All of a sudden, I can break this pattern. The pattern being that if I fight with any thought, I go to war with myself. I go to war with the common substance. Why would I do that? Why would I do that? I want to make sure that's clear. The thoughts are not mine, but the substance out of which all thoughts arise is myself. And because myself outlasts all thoughts, I don't need to fight a thought. It can't stay anyway. But another power opens up, and that is this ability to love the substance, the common substance, recognize the common substance out of which all of reality, including thoughts, is made, and thereby end the war that I'm having with thoughts in the first place, end the disagreement with reality. When we say we're having a thought that is causing suffering, basically we're saying one thing: I don't like what's going on here. And as long as we believe that thought, I don't like what's going on here, something needs to change. As long as we're believing that thought, we're trying to fight that thought, we're creating a fragment. We're fragmenting ourselves, going to war with ourselves. However, when I can recognize that there is one in me that is beyond all thinking, but instead that all thinking arises in, then I can honor thought for the sacred act that it is without having to fight against it. You dig what I'm saying? So the principle was that all of you is worth loving, including your thoughts, including the substance out of which all your thoughts are made. It is not that thoughts belong to you, but it is that thoughts belong to the common substance that is you. They are a part of you. Again, ocean and wave. But because the thought itself is destined to come and go, there is no need to enter into that old pattern of fighting against thoughts and going to war with yourself. Again, the ocean that fights against the wave is at war with itself. So now we need to know the path forward. Now we need to know the path forward. The principle was that all of you is worth loving. The entire ocean of you is worth loving, including the waves. The pattern was that, like the ocean fighting against the waves, if you decide that you want to fight against thoughts, you are at war with yourself. So now we need the path forward. We need the way to know, okay, how do I stay clear? How do I create that separation, that distance, so that I can remember this greater unification, this greater common substance? How can I do that at a moment's notice? Remember the silent watcher. This is our path forward. Remember the silent watcher. If instead of thinking about the thought, I want to think about the one who never thinks, I just want to remember the one who never thinks, the one that is constantly aware. Once I'm remembering the one that never thinks, then by definition, the thoughts no longer, I've created that separation immediately. The thoughts are no longer mine, but a greater recognition opens up in that very moment, which is that the thoughts are no longer mine, but there is a common substance that is me. And I notice that all thoughts arise out of that, which means that if as long as I love the substance, and the substance itself is love, as long as I can recognize this common substance, there's never a need for me to go to war with thoughts. The thoughts must come and go, but the watcher remains. And the substance, this awareness, we say awareness is the substance, this awareness, which is the watcher, which births thoughts naturally but does not hold on to them, just like the ocean births waves naturally but does not hold on to them. The watcher has no need to ever go to war with negative thoughts or with any thought, which means that this watcher, this awareness, this love becomes salvation itself, the end of all suffering. Because suffering can only be known once I'm ruminating, once I'm thinking, once I'm back at that sense of, I don't like what's going on here. This needs to stop. Once I'm at war with myself, that's when suffering begins. Once I'm at war with thought, that's when I'm at war with myself. That's when suffering begins. However, if I'm able to remember the silent watcher and simply be aware of the thought, for me, I notice within 3 seconds, at least within 3 seconds, the emotion, the fear, the trepidation, all that just falls away. What happens when you stop thinking thoughts are yours? You remember that all is you. Let me say that again. What happens when you stop thinking thoughts are yours? You remember that all is you, which means that all of you is worth loving, which means that the pattern of going to war with yourself can end because you have remembered the source. You have remembered the silent watcher, the one that sees all thoughts come and all thoughts go, but is not moved. The silent watcher is not coming and going. And that silent watcher, from its presence, we begin to detect this higher frequency, this frequency of love moving through. And we can take that frequency of love and we can actually spread it to the thoughts. This is what it means when we get at this principle of all of you is worth loving. That the thoughts are not garbage. They're not trash. They're just bits of you trying to get attention. They do not belong to you, but they belong to the substance that is you. So you can both, just as the ocean and the wave, you can give birth to this wave as the ocean without going to war with the wave. You can watch the birth of this thought as this ocean of awareness without getting involved or going to war with the wave of thought. Somebody let me know you understand. Because when we remember that silent watcher, love flourishes. Love responds. Excellent. Okay. So I'm seeing calling for the lions. Let me see. Let me see. I asked that question. What happens when you stop thinking thoughts are yours? Calling for the lion says yes. And two, I started to be able to escape the sense of pressure and time. Excellent. Excellent. Dealing with those, yeah. So Denim, I see you. I see your comment. Like dealing with the voices. You saying dealing with the voices in the head. Like that's good. That means you're aware of the voices in the head. That's good. Which means the watcher has already seen. Which means the watcher is silent and watching. So already there's already separation or a detachment, a separation without alienation, a separation, a detachment without alienation. You stay in that position for long enough, and all of a sudden you start to see, wait a minute, I can love in a new way. Twin saying, I did what I heard was before. Therefore, it is my son, my path in life is solidified in stone, whether I like. Okay, excellent, excellent. Right. So calling for the line says the thoughts that don't originate with me. Right. Right. She said, so twin saying, you remember you got us to the point of I decide. Absolutely. But that decision, when we talk about the watcher, that again is that supreme awareness. From that position, now we can encounter our thoughts from a new perspective, from a new position, which means that our decision making capabilities, they begin to increase because now we're not just reacting to some random thought that carried some negative emotion. And so literally you do this enough, you'll be able to see how you'll be able to watch how your mind makes decisions. And that process is helpful because then you'll be able to make a new choice. Twin saying, I understand. I understand. Felicity saying, I understand. Excellent. You see, I'm picking up what you're putting down. Excellent, excellent, excellent. And so with that, well, shoot, uh-oh. So y'all know last week, Breakthrough Turtle was having a little bit of issue. But I think he's ready. He's been rehabbing, you know what I'm saying? He was back in PT. They went ahead and they got him together. He said he wants to come through for just a moment. Let's hear what he got to say. Okay. Okay. Y'all know what time it is. Breakthrough Turtle, welcome back. You looking good. You know what I'm saying? The fam's happy to see you. You know, and so, I know rehab was a whole thing. You probably don't want to get into it, but what you got for us today, man? You know what I'm saying? We've been talking about the Watcher. We've been talking about this whole situation of getting to a place of infinite awareness. You know what I'm saying? Like you typically hit us with the great information. I wonder what you got for us today. Is it going to be related? You know what I'm saying? Sometimes we'll be real gentle here. Cool. Breakthrough Turtle, he got a whole thing going on. Okay, every week he brings us something that, generally speaking, we can use. Okay, so let's see what we got. He's giving us. Appreciate you, B. Okay. So here we go. Oh, they got the turtles in the chat for you. You know what I'm saying? He said, to Twist says, I thought you were still in the hospital. They let him out. You know what I'm saying? Um, okay, Breakthrough. All right, B. So here's what B's saying. Here we go. He's saying there is one irrefutable law of the universe. We are each responsible for our own life. If you're holding anyone else accountable for your happiness, you're wasting your time. You must be fearless enough to give yourself the love you didn't receive. Yeah, okay. Don't be coming through. Like, hey, Breakthrough Turtle, bro, you come through. Like, it's that last line for me. You must be fearless enough to give yourself the love you didn't receive. What was the principle for today? I'm not like, you know what I'm saying? Like, none of this is, I promise this is not scheduled. You know what I'm saying? Like, Breakthrough Turtle be doing his thing. And the moment that we have our principle of the day was all of you is worth loving. And we're seeing that thoughts themselves, they do not belong to you. They are not accessories. And yet they are not, they do arise from a common substance. And so to fight against a thought, paradoxically, is to fight against yourself, even though the thought itself does not belong to, it's not something that you, when I say it doesn't belong to you, I mean it's not something that you keep and hold in your pocket. It's not an accessory. It is not essential to who you are, which means that necessarily the thought must come and go. But when we can recognize the common substance out of which thought is made, we get to the root of our issue, which is that there makes no sense to ever go to war with a thought because the thought is, you could say, me in disguise. And I don't want to go to war with myself. Why? Because all of me is worth loving, just like all of you is worth loving. So you must be fearless enough to give yourself the love you didn't receive. And we're talking about that same, this is the Breakthrough Turtle quote. We're talking about that same concept when it comes to the principle. We're talking about that same concept when it comes to the principle. that all of you is worth loving. Oprah Winfrey actually says this. This is an Oprah Winfrey quote. You must be fearless enough to give yourself the love you didn't receive. However, Oprah meant this in the context of tonight, truly, even when you're dealing with the most oppressive thoughts, when you're dealing with the programming that society has forced on you, the task is to stop thinking that the thoughts belong to you and start recognizing the substance, this greater awareness, start recognizing this watcher out of which all thoughts arise and all thoughts are made. In the fight with the thought, and you find naturally that love floods your entire reality. Yeah. Twin saying, read it again. There is one irrefutable law of the universe. We are each responsible for our own life. If you're holding anyone else accountable for your happiness, you're wasting your time. You must be fearless enough to give yourself the love you didn't receive. Amen. Good looking, B. B, won't he do it? So that's the thing. What happens when you stop thinking thoughts are yours? The principle of the night is that you recognize that all of you is worth loving, that the thoughts are a part of yourself, do not belong to yourself, but are a part of yourself. The pattern, the place where we get into trouble is when we start attacking those thoughts, fighting those thoughts, disagreeing with the presence of those thoughts. But the path forward is when we recognize and remember the silent watcher, the one that never thinks, but instead witnesses all thought. And from that one, we see that being witness to all thought, it retains its capacity to love all things, including all thoughts. It ends the war with yourself. It ends the war with thinking, with wishing you were a different place, with wishing things were going differently, with being afraid of the future. It ends the war with all the thoughts that create suffering. And what remains is the silent watcher, which is always at peace and always in love. And so, folks, I must say, on this episode, just like every other episode, we need to understand that if fear is our only enemy, then we bring heaven to earth when we transform our minds. I'm Dr. Shawn, and we were not sent to impress our people. We were sent to transform our people into a light for the world. For God's universe opens to all who believe in breakthrough.